On behalf of Brookhaven National Laboratory, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome all of you here today for the Long Island Capital Alliance Technology Transfer Forum. This is something we've participated in before over the years. It's an important part of one of the goals that Brookhaven shares with LICA and with a number of other companies, which is to continue to grow the Long Island economy, and in particular to use technologies that come from the research institutions, places like Stony Brook University, Cold Spring Harbor, LIJ, and Brookhaven, working with companies, working with groups like LICA to create jobs on Long Island. That's one of the goals that the laboratory has put down for itself, among others, in the last several years, and I'll tell you about the larger set of goals in a minute. And so it's a great pleasure for us to have this opportunity to be part of this and also to meet with all of you and to see all of you. I'm going to say a couple things about Brookhaven in a sec. In general terms, you can start reading if you like. But the first thing I'd like to say is that safety at Brookhaven is a core value. Even when we're not on the Brookhaven site, we like to start off with that message. In fact, whenever we interact with people at Brookhaven, we like to send you home in better shape than you came. We like you to have been enhanced by talking to us and being among us. And we certainly don't want anyone hurt. So it's foggy out there. When you're driving home, please be careful and take care. So I don't know if you can read this very easily. Let me just say a couple things about Brookhaven Lab. In general terms, we're a multi-purpose, in that sense like a university, lots of different interests. Office of Science Lab, that's associated with the Department of Energy. So we have broad fundamental interests as well as interest directly in making applications. One of the things that distinguishes a national laboratory is the way in which we can pull together teams of people to work on projects that satisfy ultimately the Department of Energy mission, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So we can pull together teams. That's a little different from university. And we also make big facilities, machines that no other universities or industries by themselves can build, but which the United States government, in answering its broad mission, thinks are crucial, for example, to attack the nation's biggest problems looking ahead. Among those, obviously, the energy problem, among many others. So Brookhaven is a multi-purpose laboratory. It has a broad agenda in science, and it builds facilities that ultimately further the mission in general terms. So those are the ways in which we're different from other kinds of places. We happen to be, as you can see on this slide, although we're a Department of Energy lab, we're managed by Stony Brook University and Battelle, together with some other core universities. Altogether, about a $700 million operation, 3,000 employees, and when you come out and visit us, we squeeze onto 5,000 acres out at exit 68. Well, this is I'm a little bit embarrassed. We like to tell you how great we are. Over the course of our lifetime, going back 65 years, there have been 7 Nobel Prizes at the laboratory, plus a whole bunch of other awards. That particular picture is of Esther Takeuchi picking up the National Medal of Technology from President Obama, in particular for her work on batteries. She's a joint appointment with Stony Brook and with Brookhaven. So here's a picture of the place. In the most general terms, the mission of the Department of Energy, just in 12 or 13 words, is discover the solutions that power and secure America's future. The Department of Energy has a broad mission to take on national problems that no other part of the government or the private enterprise can take on. Discover the solutions, if you think about it, immediately attaches to Brookhaven. The underlying science and technology, the basic interest we have in finding out about the world is the discovery part, in understanding the world around us. And then the solutions refers to the way in which we bring to bear what we understand to specific applications or specific areas where we can have an impact. So discover the solutions is pretty obvious. That power and secure America's future, that's a direct reference to power is to energy security, national security, and also economic security. So forums like this immediately are obviously part of Brookhaven's mission. We're interested not just in understanding, not just in doing the basic science that underlies understanding, but also in impacting the economy and having impact that furthers the nation's interests. And as I mentioned, particularly in the last several years within the Department of Energy, creating jobs, moving from discovery to deployment is directly part of that mission. For the last 5 or 10 years at the lab, in fact, we added to our mission this notion of discovery to deployment, of which this is a direct reflection. So I'll just say a couple more things about the lab and then let you get going. Here's a picture of the place. You can see that it's a big place, and you can also see, I don't know if I can't see anything. That's the relativistic heavy ion collider RIC, and this is NSLS-2, National Synchrotron Light Source 2. The point I want to make is that a Department of Energy lab, one associated with the Office of Science, makes big facilities that, say, a university or a company couldn't. The NSLS-2, which is just coming up now, is a synchrotron source. It's an intense source of X-rays that are used to study the materials and properties, to study the characteristics of materials and properties that underlie all kinds of applications. For example, in energy, batteries, grid, solar cells, or processes, biological processes, life science processes. There's a whole broad range of activities that go on at NSLS number 2 using these intense sources of X-rays. It's $1 billion facility, so it's not something that anyone could just build. And we're delighted to say that it's coming online just right now. We're in the commissioning phase, and the first experiments are being done, which is really exciting for us. That's an example of one of the 2 big focus areas of the laboratory. We focus directly on energy, and facilities like that are what drive us. The other big facility that underlies energy is our nanocenter. You're going to hear a couple of folks who come from the nanocenter today, or at least one, talking twice, illustrating the way in which nanomaterials have applications, certainly in energy and more broadly. The big circle up top is RIC, the relativistic heavy ion collider. That's a nuclear physics project. The goal there is to understand, ultimately, to understand the origin of visible matter. Pretty cool. What we do there is we collide ions at very high energy. So one of those big rings is an accelerator, accelerating ions in one direction. In the other one, they're accelerating ions or nuclei in the opposite direction at high energies, and then they collide them. And when these ions collide, it's as if in the collision region, for the tiny fraction of a second that they overlap, in the tiny region that they overlap, it's as if you heated them up to like a few trillion degrees. And what happens is these nuclei melt. Also, the neutrons and the protons inside the nuclei melt. And we can look directly at the fundamental particles that make up visible matter. Those are called quarks and gluons. Quarks and gluons are ultimately the particles that make up what we see. And the experiment we're doing there is to understand their properties and how it is that the properties of visible matter come about. The big discovery of the last 10 years was that quarks and gluons at those really high temperatures make a perfect fluid. Those quarks and gluons flow as if they had no viscosity, no resistance to flow, which is a total surprise. One of the things that makes that really cool is that those that quarks and gluons at those high temperatures, that corresponds to the origin of the universe. That state of matter existed a millionth of a second after the universe was born. So we're looking at the origin of the universe with that machine, and what we've discovered is that the underlying constituents of visible matter, quarks and gluons, flow as a perfect fluid. So we're trying to understand that over the next 10 and longer, 20 years, as part of the broad mission of the Department of Energy. You may ask whether any applications come from that, and in fact, lots do. For example, the detectors and the computers and in fact, the ion source themselves offer applications, and there's a fair amount of technology transfer there, including, for example, ion therapy for cancer. So both of these big machines, the NSLS-2 directly offers a way to characterize materials and processes toward applications, But also, our fundamental science project does that too. The technology that is needed to do that experiment spins off new possibilities. I'm looking at Connie, and I get the feeling I'm just about done in terms of the time they graciously gave us. 5 more minutes.
Yeah, you're good.
Wow. So those are the two of the big areas that we do at Brookhaven. A big focus on energy driven by NSLS2 and by the Nano Center, and then nuclear physics also driven by RIG. But there's a whole array of areas that we focus on, and in fact we'll hear about a number of them today, for example in life sciences and elsewhere. Those are some pretty pictures of the facilities that we have at the laboratory. I won't go through those now, but those are the ones I've just described, including, by the way, our cool 30 megawatt, 200 acre solar array, which you can beg me to talk about when I'm done if you haven't had enough by then. There are a number of technologies that are being presented today. It's a pleasure to mention some of those. The first one is has to do with I'll read that. Robust renewable chemical feedstock. That's John Shanklin, who's devised a way to increase the oil in seeds and leaves in plants that has all kinds of possible applications more broadly, certainly in energy, but also in plastics and other things. A pretty exciting development and something we're very intensely interested in and excited about ourselves. I'm going to another one is green sulfurete concrete. The CEO of that is Bill Biamonte, and I think he's here. Paul Kalb is the BNL inventor associated with that. It's a concrete that is like 100% more powerful than the regular Portland cement that you're used to seeing. We started at Brookhaven and already has a representation as a company. SLOA, his name is otherwise unpronounceable, is going to talk about superconducting fault limiters. There is a fundamental science program at the laboratory. We're interested in high temperature superconductors and the mystery of the fact that in some oxide materials, when you cool them down just below liquid nitrogen temperature, the current goes to 0. That has remarkable applications, many possibilities. In this case, it's a fault limiter, a very slick way to control power electronics in case of some kind of an interruption. So he'll talk about that. Then Chuck Black will talk about 2 different applications. One, anti-glare surface coating technology. This is a nanoscience, the treatment of a surface that reduces the reflectivity. It has obvious applications in solar arrays where you want to bounce the incident light around and capture as much on the silicon surfaces as you can, but it has other applications more broadly. And then a nanostructure treatment for surfaces that makes them more water repellent. That has obvious applications in windshields, but more broadly. And there's a really cool picture of a drop bouncing up and down on I don't know if you're going to show it, but if you are, Chuck, that's an ad. So that's the set of applications that we're talking about today. It's a great pleasure to have all of you here. It is a great pleasure for me. I'm going to make a personal statement. It's a little bit unusual. I'm sorry I'm going to embarrass you. Up until today, I thought there were only 2 Doons in the world, myself and Doon Arbus, the daughter of a photographer, Diane Arbus, in the city. I just met another one. Doon Fong, put up your hand, is the 3rd Doon. It's a pleasure to welcome him here today. Say hello to him, give him your encouragement, and thank you very much for coming.